Picture this. You've just retired, your golden years stretching before you like a sun-dappled path. You're imagining cozy family dinners, impromptu visits from grandchildren, and the warmth of being surrounded by loved ones. It sounds perfect, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this idyllic scenario could be the very thing that robs you of your joy, independence, and sense of self? I'm an 80-year-old man who's seen it all, lived it all, and yes, made plenty of mistakes along the way. Today I'm here to share a story, not my own, but that of a dear friend. Her journey might just save you from making what could be the biggest mistake of your life. So, grab a cup of tea, settle into your favorite chair, and prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew about aging, family, and the true meaning of independence. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be looking at your retirement plans in a whole new light. Let me introduce you to my dear friend. We'll call her Margaret. Margaret was a force of nature, a woman who had navigated life's ups and downs with grace and determination. She had just bid farewell to her husband of 50 years, her partner in crime, her rock. Grief-stricken and feeling unmoored, she made a decision that seemed not just logical, but almost inevitable. She moved in with her daughter and her family. The first few months were nothing short of idyllic. Margaret found herself enveloped in a cocoon of familial warmth. The patter of little feet in the morning, the aroma of family dinners wafting through the house, impromptu movie nights with popcorn battles. It was as if she had stepped into a Hallmark movie. She felt rejuvenated, as though she had discovered the mythical fountain of youth in her grandchildren's giggles and her daughter's warm embrace. But here's the thing about idyllic scenarios. They often have expiration dates. As the calendar pages turned, subtle shifts began to occur in Margaret's daily routine. What started as the occasional afternoon of babysitting morphed into full-time childcare duty. Before she knew it, she was elbow-deep in diaper changes, bottle preparations, and the chaos of managing energetic toddlers. It was exhausting, but Margaret told herself this was her new purpose. After all, isn't this what grandmothers are supposed to do? A wise man once said, "Time is a cruel thief to rob us of our former selves." And oh, how Margaret began to feel the truth of those words. Her days, once filled with book club discussions, coffee dates with friends, and peaceful moments of self-reflection, were now consumed by the relentless demands of family life. But here's where it gets interesting. Margaret didn't complain. Not outwardly, at least. Like many of her generation, she had been raised to believe that family comes first, that self-sacrifice is a virtue, and that being needed is the ultimate validation of one's worth. She smiled through the exhaustion, convinced herself that this was her calling. However, beneath the surface, something was stirring. A sense of loss, vague and undefined at first, began to take root in Margaret's heart. This, my friends, is where we encounter what experts have termed the slave grandmother syndrome. It's not just a catchy phrase. It's a very real phenomenon that's affecting countless older adults who find themselves in similar situations. Picture this. You're on an emotional roller coaster that never seems to end. One moment, you're basking in the joy of your grandchild's first words. The next, you're fighting back tears of frustration as you cancel yet another plan with old friends because of family obligations. It's like trying to hold onto a soap bubble, beautiful, but impossibly fragile and fleeting. Studies have shown that this syndrome can have profound effects on the mental and physical health of older adults. The constant demands, the lack of personal time, the erosion of independence, all these factors can contribute to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and even physical ailments. It's as if these grandparents are running a never-ending marathon, but instead of a finish line, they face an endless road stretching before them. Margaret began to exhibit classic symptoms of this syndrome. She was constantly tired, not just physically, but emotionally drained. She found herself snapping at small things, then drowning in guilt over her irritability. But still, she soldiered on, telling herself that this was normal, that this was what grandmothers do. But is it really normal to sacrifice your entire being on the altar of family duty? Is it truly a sign of love to erase yourself so completely? Spoiler alert, it's not. As weeks turned into months, Margaret found herself increasingly drawn to the window, gazing out at a world that seemed to be passing her by. She remembered the days when she could spontaneously decide to take a pottery class or spend an afternoon at the museum. Now, such outings seemed like distant luxuries, as unattainable as the stars. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? Margaret had moved closer to her family, seeking connection and companionship, yet she felt more isolated than ever. As author Olivia Lang aptly put it, loneliness is personal, and it is also political. Loneliness is collective. It is a city. Margaret was living in a city of loneliness, surrounded by the very people she loved most. But wait, the plot thickens. What started as a dream of family togetherness began to morph into something far more complex and challenging. Have you ever noticed how the people closest to us often have the power to hurt us the most? Margaret's daughter, Sarah, began to show a side of herself that Margaret had never seen before, or perhaps had chosen not to see. It started small, a critical comment here, a dismissive gesture there, but soon it became a pattern. One day, as Margaret was preparing lunch for the kids, Sarah stormed into the kitchen, her face a storm cloud of frustration. "Mom, how many times do I have to tell you that the kids don't like crusts on their sandwiches? Why can't you remember these simple things?" The words hit Margaret like a physical blow, leaving her stunned and hurt. This incident wasn't isolated. Gradually, suggestions turned into commands, gentle advice into harsh criticism. Margaret felt her world shrinking, her voice diminishing to a whisper. Does this sound familiar? Perhaps you've experienced something similar or know someone who has. Renowned psychologist Erik Erikson spoke extensively about the importance of maintaining autonomy in later life. According to his theory of psychosocial development, older adults face a crisis of integrity versus despair. Those who can look back on their lives with satisfaction develop a sense of integrity, while those who struggle with this stage may fall into despair. Isn't it ironic that in seeking to be closer to her family, Margaret was unwittingly setting herself up for this crisis of despair? The weight of this new reality began to press down on Margaret like a physical force. Her days, once filled with dreams of travel and personal projects, were now reduced to a never-ending cycle of childcare and household chores. Where was the woman who had dreamed of seeing the northern lights? Who had talked about learning to play the piano? Who had plans to write her memoirs? She was fading away, like a photograph left too long in the sun, bleached of all color and vibrancy. A recent study from the University of Michigan revealed a startling fact. Older adults who maintain their independence report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction and overall well-being. It's not rocket science when you think about it. How would any of us feel if every aspect of our lives was controlled by someone else, even if that someone was a loved one? As days turned into weeks, frustration began to simmer in Margaret's heart. Every directive from her daughter, every demand from her grandchildren, every dismissive comment from her son-in-law, they all became tiny cracks in the foundation of her self-esteem. Resentment, that most corrosive of emotions, began to seep into the cracks, threatening to erode the very relationships she had sought to strengthen. But it wasn't just about the loss of independence. Margaret found herself caught in a web of family dynamics she had never fully appreciated before. Her son-in-law, once warm and welcoming, now seemed to bristle at her constant presence. She would catch him rolling his eyes when she spoke, or making pointed comments about having no privacy. Her grandchildren, while still affectionate, began to treat her more like a servant than a beloved grandmother, expecting her to cater to their every whim without thanks. The financial aspect, too, began to weigh heavily on Margaret's mind. While she had her own pension, she found herself constantly reaching for her wallet. A little here for school supplies, a little there for family outings. She wanted to contribute, to feel like a valuable part of the household. But as her savings dwindled, a new fear began to take root. What if she outlived her money? What if she became a true burden on her family? One night, after a particularly grueling day of tantrums, spills, and harsh words, Margaret found herself sitting on the edge of her bed, silent tears streaming down her face. The room that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a prison cell. She was reminded of a quote by philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre: "Hell is other people." Had her heaven become her hell? But hold on to your seats, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Sometimes, the universe has a way of sending us exactly what we need, precisely when we need it most. It was an ordinary Tuesday when Margaret's old friend, Louise, decided to pay a surprise visit. Louise breezed in like a breath of fresh air, her smile as bright as ever, a bag of freshly baked cookies in her hand. As the two old friends settled in for a chat, Louise's keen eyes noticed the shadows under Margaret's eyes, the slump in her shoulders. "Maggie," she said gently, using the nickname from their college days. "What's going on? You don't seem like yourself." And just like that, the dam broke. Words poured out of Margaret like a river breaking through ice in spring. She told Louise everything: her exhaustion, her frustration, her feeling of being trapped in a life she no longer recognized as her own. "You know," Margaret confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing. I'm not Margaret anymore. I'm just Grandma. I love my family, I truly do. But where is the woman who dreamed of seeing the world? Who used to stay up all night discussing philosophy and art? I feel like I'm fading away, and the worst part is, I don't think anyone even notices." Louise listened with the patience and understanding that only a true friend can offer. Then she shared her own story, how she too had struggled after moving in with her son and his family. "I felt like I was drowning," Louise admitted. "But then I realized something important. Loving my family doesn't mean I have to stop loving myself." Louise went on to explain how she had reclaimed her independence. She had moved into a small apartment of her own, close enough to her family to visit often, but far enough to have her own space and life. "It was terrifying at first," she said with a chuckle, "but it's the best decision I ever made." As Margaret listened to her friend's story, something shifted inside her. A spark of hope, long dormant, flickered to life. Louise's words echoed in her mind. "You can still be close to your family, but you need your space to be you. It's not selfish, it's essential." That night, after Louise left, Margaret sat at her small desk, a cup of tea growing cold beside her as she lost herself in thought. She was reminded of a quote by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard: "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." For too long, Margaret realized, she had been living as a shadow of herself, trying to fit into a role that was slowly suffocating her. With trembling hands, she opened her laptop and began to search for apartments in the area. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. Another quote came to mind, this time from Mary Oliver. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Margaret was determined to reclaim her life, to make it wild and precious once again. But making the decision was only the first step on a challenging journey. When Margaret announced her intention to move out, it was met with a storm of emotions from her family. Her daughter was hurt and confused, interpreting the decision as a rejection of her and her children. Her son-in-law, while visibly relieved, made snide comments about her being ungrateful. Even her grandchildren were upset, worried that they would see less of their beloved grandmother. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster, filled with tense conversations, tearful nights, and moments of doubt. But Margaret stood her ground, drawing strength from Louise's support and her own growing sense of self. She explained to her family, patiently and lovingly, that this move wasn't about them, but about her need to reclaim her identity and independence. "I'm not leaving you," she told her tearful daughter one evening. "I'm finding myself again. And when I do, I'll be an even better mother and grandmother, because I'll be whole." After much searching, Margaret found a small, sunny apartment just a few blocks from her daughter's house. Moving was both exhilarating and terrifying. Years of living as part of a family unit had left her with few possessions of her own. But as she began to furnish her new space, choosing colors and styles that reflected her personality, she felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. The first few weeks in her new apartment were a mix of emotions. After years of constant noise and activity, the silence was deafening. There were moments when loneliness threatened to overwhelm her, when she found herself reaching for the phone to call her daughter, just to hear a familiar voice. But gradually, day by day, she began to settle into a rhythm of her own making. She joined a local book club, rediscovering her passion for literature and engaging in the kind of deep, thought-provoking discussions she had missed. She signed up for a beginner's painting class, finally pursuing the artistic inclinations she had set aside for so long. She even started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding joy in caring for creatures who needed her, but didn't demand every moment of her day. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in her relationship with her family. Without the constant friction of living together, their interactions became more positive, more intentional. Her daughter, who had initially been hurt by the move, began to see the positive changes in her mother. Their conversations, no longer dominated by household chores and childcare logistics, became deeper and more meaningful. Her grandchildren, rather than seeing her as a live-in babysitter, now looked forward to their visits with excitement. They would come over to her apartment, marveling at her paintings and begging to hear stories about her new adventures. Margaret found she had more energy and patience for them, making their time together more special and memorable. This transformation aligns perfectly with what psychologist Erik Erikson described in his theory of psychosocial development. Margaret was moving from a state of potential despair to one of integrity, finding meaning and satisfaction in her life's journey. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." Margaret had rediscovered her why, not just as a mother and grandmother, but as an individual with her own dreams, passions, and purpose. The lesson here is profound, yet simple. Love does not mean losing oneself in others. True love, both for oneself and for family, flourishes when we respect each other's autonomy and space. As Margaret stood at the window of her new apartment one evening, a paintbrush in her hand and a half-finished canvas before her, she smiled at her reflection. She had regained control of her life, and with it, a deep, abiding sense of happiness and purpose. So what wisdom can we glean from Margaret's journey? First and foremost, that independence is not the sole province of the young. As we age, maintaining our autonomy becomes even more crucial for our mental, emotional, and even physical well-being. Living close to our children doesn't have to mean sacrificing our identity or dreams. Secondly, it's never too late to make a change. Whether you're 60, 70, 80, or beyond, you have the right and the responsibility to pursue your own happiness and fulfillment. It's not selfish to prioritize your own needs. In fact, doing so often leads to healthier, more positive relationships with our loved ones. Lastly, remember that family dynamics are complex and ever-changing. What works at one stage of life might not work at another. The key is open, honest communication and a willingness to adapt as circumstances change. Love should be a liberating force, not a confining one. As we wrap up Margaret's story, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are you living the life you want, or the life others expect of you? Are you nurturing your own dreams and passions, or have they been set aside in the name of family duty? Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your independence, to rediscover the person you were before you became grandma or grandpa. Your golden years should be just that, golden, full of warmth, joy, and yes, a healthy dose of self. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your independence, to rediscover the person you were before you became grandma or grandpa. Your golden years should be just that, golden, full of warmth, joy, and yes, a healthy dose of self-discovery and adventure. Consider this. Retirement isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. It's a time when you finally have the freedom to pursue those dreams you've been putting off, to explore new interests, and to redefine yourself beyond your roles as parent or grandparent. Think about Margaret. She didn't just move out, she moved forward. She rekindled old passions and discovered new ones. She found a balance between being there for her family and being there for herself. And in doing so, she became a role model for her children and grandchildren, showing them that life is a continuous journey of growth and self-discovery. But let's be real for a moment. Making such a significant change isn't easy. It requires courage, determination, and often a thick skin. You might face resistance from family members who've grown accustomed to your constant presence and support. You might grapple with your own guilt and uncertainty. Remember, though, that setting boundaries isn't a rejection of your loved ones. It's an affirmation of your own worth and needs. By taking care of yourself, you're actually setting a powerful example for your family about self-respect and healthy relationships. Moreover, maintaining your independence can have practical benefits for your family in the long run. By staying active, engaged, and self-reliant, you're more likely to remain healthy and independent for longer. This means you're less likely to become a burden on your children in your later years, a fear that many older adults share. Let's also address the elephant in the room, the fear of loneliness. It's a valid concern, but as Margaret's story shows, living independently doesn't mean living in isolation. In fact, it often opens up opportunities for new friendships and deeper connections. Join a club, take a class, volunteer. There are countless ways to build a vibrant social life that extends beyond family ties. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone should move out from their family homes. Every situation is unique, and for some, living with family is indeed the best option. The key is to make that choice consciously, not out of a sense of obligation or fear, and to ensure that you maintain your sense of self within whatever living arrangement you choose. If you are living with family, have honest conversations about expectations, boundaries, and personal space. Carve out time for your own interests and friendships. Remember, you're not just a grandparent or parent. You're a whole person with your own needs and desires. As we near the end of our time together, I want to leave you with this thought. Aging isn't about fading away. It's about continuing to grow, to learn, to contribute to the world in meaningful ways. Your value doesn't diminish with age. If anything, your years of experience make you more valuable than ever. So whether you choose to live next door to your kids or across the country, make sure it's a decision that serves you, that allows you to be the best version of yourself. Because when you're happy and fulfilled, that positive energy ripples out to everyone around you, including your beloved family. Remember Margaret's journey. Remember how she transformed from feeling trapped and diminished to feeling vibrant and alive. That transformation is possible for you too. It's never too late to rediscover yourself, to pursue your passions, to live life on your own terms. As the poet Mary Oliver famously asked, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Your answer to that question shouldn't end when you become a grandparent. If anything, that's when the question becomes more important than ever. So, my dear viewers, I challenge you to reflect on your own lives. Are you living in a way that honors both your love for your family and your love for yourself? Are you nurturing your own growth as well as that of your grandchildren? Are you writing the story of your golden years? Or are you letting others write it for you? Remember, the choice is yours. You have the power to shape your life, to find that balance between family connection and personal fulfillment. It might not be easy, but as Margaret's story shows, it's absolutely worth it. Thank you for joining me on this journey of reflection and discovery. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, we're all in this together, supporting each other as we navigate the complexities of family, aging, and self-discovery. Until next time, this is your friend and fellow traveler on life's journey, wishing you the courage to be true to yourself the wisdom to know what you need, and the love to embrace both family and self. Here's to your golden years, being truly golden, rich with love, purpose, and yes, a healthy dose of independence. Take care and never stop growing.